Okay, so we'll make a start, and if anyone else joins Tobias, I will let them in. So welcome to this month's webinar. This is for all of our members, regardless of what level you are on. We will record it as I've just started, so it will be available in the webinars and masterclasses area as a replay. So yeah, without further ado, I'll introduce you to Tobias Batkin, who is the founder of and CEO of Bespoke Cleaning. They actually sponsored the event last week for anybody that saw the Albert's Schloss event. So yeah, Tobias, thank you so much for doing this webinar for us this month, and over to you.
So much, Anna, for having me, and hello, everybody. Thanks for joining today. Right, well, it's going to be a relatively fast-paced webinar. I think I've got half an hour to get through a lot of information. So just very brief introduction. My name is Tobias. I started this business 20 years ago from my parents' kitchen, and since then we've grown to be one of London's premier cleaning businesses. The reason that I mentioned that is because we predominantly trade with professional services companies for whom environmental sustainability and technological advancement are very, very important. So what I'm looking to do today really is just to explain to you a little bit about where we are as a business, the sort of initiatives that we've brought in, and a little bit of a view towards the future as to what we feel might be materializing in the next few years. So without much further ado, just a brief agenda. Well, I say brief agenda, there's 13 slides for me to rattle through. Obviously, I've had to be a little bit discerning here today in terms of the things that I did and didn't want to talk about. And what I've prioritized is things that I feel will give you takeaways, things that you can go back to your offices and potentially implement immediately should you wish to do so. It's meant that there's a few things that I've left out. So I'm not going to talk about the software side of things, whether that be portals and dashboards and things like that. Although these are very, very important, generally speaking, they tend to be more about how the cleaning company can be efficient in its operations, which is all very, very important, but perhaps less relevant in terms of what you may or may not wish to do following this meeting. Sorry, this webinar. So very briefly, why are we where we are today? Well, for two reasons, basically, the top down and the bottom up sort of side of things. We obviously are in an environmental or a legislative framework where we are being pushed more and more towards being as environmentally friendly and sustainable as we can be. We as businesses now are increasingly looking at every aspect of our operation to find out what impact we're having on our environment, whether that's about the individuals we work with and the communities we work with, or whether that's about the environment itself and how products and processes we use may be in some way harmful. On top of that, obviously, as I mentioned, with a client base full of professional services companies, organizations are increasingly running with this as a remit now and are demanding that their supply chain embrace these sorts of ideas. So without much further ado, we'll move on to the starting point. Obviously, I can't talk about sustainability in cleaning without talking in some way about environmentally friendly cleaning solutions. Now, the reason that I'm talking about this here is almost to say this is a fallback position today, as opposed to being something that I would suggest as a go-to solution. The reason for that is because I'll get onto in the next slide something that I think is truly groundbreaking and revolutionary, that some may call chemical-free cleaning. But if we are looking at environmentally friendly cleaning products, then for us to go to standard is Delphis Eco, which is what I would describe as the commercial equivalent of Ecova. It's fantastically effective, really good products, do what they say on the tin. Now, what these products do is obviously reduce the amount of harmful chemicals that are going into the water supply. What they don't necessarily do is reduce single-use plastics, is reduce carbon footprints from transportation and other environmental harms through the supply chain and manufacture. Now, the reason that I mention that obviously is because the solution that I really want to talk to you about today does tackle all of those things. Now, some may say, okay, yes, but we have OSIT systems, for instance, where you can heavily reduce the amount of plastic and transportation costs because of the fact that you're effectively dosing like a concentrated squash or something like that. These are great solutions, there's no denying that. They have their drawbacks as well, which tend to be that it's very difficult to encourage cleaners not to go for that extra squirt or two when they're filling up their bottles. But nonetheless, as I say, as a fallback, if you aren't able to implement the next slide that I'm talking about, then this is absolutely something that should be sort of ground zero, basic point for environmental sustainability. So I'm not sure how many of you have heard of aqueous ozone, but I'm going to sound incredibly sad here for a second, so bear with me. But if a number of years ago you'd have asked me for my fantasy cleaning product, I would have said it has to come out of a tap, it has to be environmentally friendly, non-toxic, non-corrosive, and yet be as efficient as bleach, which back then would have sounded like a fantasy. The reality is that aqueous ozone is exactly that. It's a phenomenal product. Effectively, what it does is, and I can show you a little slide of this here now, which is from their website. It's a machine that you see in front of you here. It's smaller than a boiler. It goes on the wall. You just need power supply and water supply. And after that point, you are able to create something which is called an aqueous ozone stabilized cleaning solution, which for 24 hours is capable of producing, produces a chemical which for 24 hours can be used to do most cleaning tasks. The only things it can't do are descaling and degreasing, but what it can do is eliminate 90% of the chemicals that you're currently using. We've been running these machines now in multiple sites for multiple years. We've not yet encountered one problem with these machines. So from my perspective, e-water technology is going to become the norm. There's no doubt about that as the price point comes down. Roughly speaking, they cost about £1,500, including installation. And we've calculated that over the course of their lifetime, they are considerably cheaper than buying cleaning chemicals. So as I say, an absolutely wonderful solution. Now, I should say there are others as well, such as here we've got the Toucan ecosystem, which we did trial, but for a variety of reasons I won't get into, one was not our preferred solution. Instead, we went for this, and we're very happy with what we've done, because as a consequence of that, what we're able to now produce is data. We did this at a central London legal firm who were expanding rapidly, but at the same time wanted to do so in as sustainable a fashion as possible. What we were able to do was to bring in an aqueous ozone system and then instantly deliver them tracking data as to what the actual impact of that was. As you can see from the chart, we achieved roughly an 80% reduction in the amount of chemicals that we were supplying to site, which is phenomenal. Now, what we were able to do as a consequence is to produce data like this. It might look like an awfully convoluted spreadsheet, but in truth, all we're doing here is we're taking the amount of hours that we're supplying in given months, and we're dividing the number of liters of solution that we're provided by those hours in order to get this graph here. And as you can see, no guesses for when we implemented our aqueous ozone system. It was roughly around this point here, and you have a dramatic and instant reduction. What I've done obviously in this chart here is to demonstrate the amount of cleaning chemicals that we've reduced, but what we're also able to do is to tell you what that means for grams of single-use plastic and for carbon emissions as well. And although I said I wasn't going to talk about dashboards, what we are able to do and what we do for many of our clients is we then put this data into a dashboard so that when your sustainability officer comes to you and says, talk to me about what you're doing with your supply chain, what environmental initiatives have you implemented and what have they achieved, the data is already there for you to use. As I say, I think that this is going to become the norm as cleaning companies move beyond just being labor supply, cleaning, quality concerned institutions, and move towards a point where we're really helping companies on their mission to be as environmentally friendly as possible. So I've put this slide in here. This really is actually the antithesis of everything I'm supposed to be talking about today, because this isn't actually about new environmental solutions. This is almost me just saying, well, what we need to always be very careful of is that we don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. That there are some very effective environmental solutions that we can use that have been around for a very long time. Now, obviously, microfiber technology, I'm sure all of you have cleaning services that involve that. But steam cleaning is one, for instance, that we find ourselves using more and more now. If I look at hard floor surfaces, quite often this can be a go-to solution for us, because where you have a porous floor or a delicate or high-value floor, in truth, the more you clean it, the more that you damage it. So you have to be very careful as to the amount of liquid that you put down and the type of chemicals that you're using. Steam cleaning is a fantastic way of getting around that, and it's environmentally friendly as well. On top of that, we're now moving into an era where when the environmental movement first started, and I'm just displaying a really great example of this. When it first started, the environmental movement meant quite often we were forced into positions of making sacrifices. So we have to either spend more money or we have to accept that the machine isn't going to be quite as good as the one that it's replacing. Energy efficient machines is the case in point. Quite often when they said energy efficient, it just meant it worked half as well as the machine it was replacing. But now we're moving into an era where if I take this very catchily named ERP 180 from Pneumatic, this should replace your Henrys, and we'll be rolling these out in the coming months. It's a very new machine. It's made from, I believe, about 80% recycled plastic. Its energy consumption is considerably less, and yet it's a highly effective machine. So it's just to say that there are great solutions out there that do not cost more money and are environmentally friendly and have great credentials when it comes to their build quality and the fabrics that they're made from. The final point from a sustainability perspective that I'd like to talk about here really is UVC technology. Because again, this one is a bit of a surprise really that it hasn't taken off as much as it might have done. During the time of the pandemic, obviously, a lot of organizations were using fogging and misting, which for me is the equivalent of spraying pesticide within an office. These are highly, highly toxic chemicals that are basically borrowed from an industrial process and are being applied to an office environment. I understand completely why they were used, and they do work, I'm not denying that, but they do come with some major issues. One of which is that you have to quite often shut down fire systems, you have to shut down your HVAC systems, you have to close your offices sometimes for 24 to 48 hours in order to allow the residue to in the air to not be toxic for people to breathe. And on top of that, it does leave a residue sometimes on paperwork and can leave a sticky film on some surfaces depending on how it's used. UVC technology, on the other hand, has been around for about 120 years or so, is used across the world to purify water in food production. And another example, when you go to a nail bar, for instance, you'll have UVC machines there. Highly effective, obviously uses the power of light in order to disinfect. The picture that you can see there is one service that we were offering, which was a disinfection of keyboards using a UVC wand. So when we were, during the pandemic, talking about touch points, this is what we were using. We also have a much bigger version of this, which is a giant lamp, which is about this big. That lamp is highly, highly powerful. So powerful, in fact, that we do have to shut the office whilst it's being used, but only whilst it's being used, and have to wear these biohazard suits so we don't burn our skin, and goggles so that we don't blind ourselves. But the great thing about it is it's portable. It can be pointed at whatever area you need to disinfect, and is highly effective. So I suppose overall the message I'm trying to get across here is that there are some great solutions that are coming in, such as aqueous ozone, and some of the environmentally friendly cleaning chemicals, but there are also things that have existed for a long time which are highly effective, such as steam and UVC, that it would be remiss of me not to talk about. So to summarize where we are in terms of environmental strategies or new products and services that we're offering, we're in a wonderful position now where we do not have to sacrifice on cost, we do not have to sacrifice on efficacy, and the effect is that we can reduce harmful chemicals, reduce single-use plastics, reduce logistics, and give you great data to show what we're actually doing and how this is moving the needle. So I hope that that side of things has given you some food for thought as to what you may or may not be able to implement within your own businesses. So onto the technological side of things. Excuse me. Obviously, in cleaning, and some of you may well be aware that this has almost been a running joke ever since I've been in the business, that we've been saying next year we'll be using robots. And as I say, for a long while, this was a joke. Now I think it's the joke that's starting to lose its humor. We're starting to find that robots do have applications. Lots of sites are already using these. There are some great applications for robotics already within cleaning, but there are equally some limitations. So what I want to briefly talk through here is where I think these are very useful, but equally what we're not able to do, and maybe what we need to do in order to get to that holy grail of greater degrees of automation and robotics in cleaning. So starting off with what they're good at. Some of you may well have been to Terminal 5, for instance, and seen that they have a robotic scrubber dryer that moves around. This is highly effective. Where you have large spaces where there is a repetitive cleaning task, such as vacuuming or scrubbing and drying, robots are already highly effective, highly efficient, and the cost-benefit analysis proves that they are cheaper than employing an individual to do the same job over a period of time. They're highly robust machines. They rarely go wrong, or when they do, usually they are fixed fairly quickly. So as I say, in those environments, fantastic solution. In offices, though, we tend to find that this technology isn't really there yet. The thing about cleaning offices is that obviously there's far more detail, let's say, in what the cleaning operative needs to achieve, and far more intelligence that needs to be used in working out what they do and don't do. You know, the classic one would be what's waste and what's not waste. That's something that has been a conversation point in cleaning sites for generations and continues to be so. Until we get to the point where machines are intelligent enough to be able to make decisions, I think it's unlikely that we're going to find a greater degree of robotics within the workplace. However, I don't think that that gap is impossible to bridge. And in fact, it's in the process of being bridged as we speak. We call that the intelligence gap. That's where we are at the moment. And to give you a little insight into what will potentially bridge that gap, I want to talk to you about a very exciting development within cleaning, which is AI auditing. So it may be surprising to hear that in cleaning, we are looking at implementing AI. I guess it's just true that there really is no industry that isn't going to be touched by this. Just last week, for instance, I had a demonstration of one of these systems. At the moment, there are organizations out there that claim that they can use these. I've seen them in use. The reality is they still remain at a stage of being slightly gimmicky. To give you an example, they demonstrated this within our meeting room in our office. The AI system gave it a clean bill of health, but there were scuff marks on the door. There was a little bit of dirt in the corner of the room. There was a smudge mark in the mirror. The human eye is still far more able to spot discrepancies and the details that are important, whereas an AI system, even with all the calibration in the world, is still finding it very difficult to work out what good quality cleaning looks like. I'm sure it will get there over time, and seeing how these systems are developing, I'm confident that within the next 5 years, it will be far more robust than it is today. The other issue that it faces is to do with image limitations. Now, what that basically means is it's only going to be as effective as the camera that's being used. So we will still be relying on our individual cleaners to do this. It may be that rather than using their own smartphones, we're deploying some form of tech to site for them to use. But as I say, I still feel, and we are very much still at a stage where if I was to put a human being on site, that human being would be far more effective in managing the standards of cleaning than an AI system. But what I wanted to do was to paint this picture of the future for you so that you can see in due course what the gap is at the moment between robotics being a reality day-to-day in offices and what we're doing at the moment in order to bridge that gap. So it is progressing at a furious pace, but we're not quite there yet. So I did say at the beginning that I wanted to talk to you mostly about practical solutions, things that you could take away, things that are useful today. And then I went off on one about robotics, which is not quite there yet. But as I say, I think I have to talk about that because it is a really exciting part of the future that we face. Something that is really possible to implement today is IoT sensors. This is an initiative that we've started to tentatively use with great results. So there are three. Well, sorry, before I tell you about where we can apply them, I should explain what IoT sensors are in this instance. As you can see from the picture, they're effectively these little tracking devices that you put above doors. They're incredibly rudimentary. They're not cameras. Think of them effectively as doing the same job as the individual outside a nightclub who's just clicking that clicker as people come in and out of the premises. So what they do is they tell us when a space has had someone come into it and leave it. And the three main applications for that, two of which are toilets, I'm sorry to say, are very, very effective. So the first application of a toilet is sometimes some sites you have front of house toilets, client-facing toilets. What we're able to do with an IoT tracking system is guarantee to you that every single time that toilet gets used, our day staff, day janitor, will get a notification on their phone telling them that it's been used and will go in there within 10 minutes, let's say, of it being used, which guarantees to a large degree that every time one of your customers goes into site, it goes into a bathroom, they will find it perfectly clean and the way that they'd like to find it, which elevates the customer experience where this is important, which for many of you it will be. The other application in bathrooms is where we find that there are too few bathrooms for the number of individuals that we have on site. So in those situations, a slightly different application, we would program the system to tell us when there have been, say, 20 or 30 instances of people visiting bathrooms, and then that would trigger a notification to the cleaner to go in and clean them. We do have a few sites where this is an issue, and the problem, well, the way that it gets solved traditionally is that you would ask your day janitor to go in every 5 to 10 minutes, or sorry, 5 to 10 minutes, every hour or so, to check on the bathrooms and make sure that they're okay. The reality is that during the lunchtime hours, or perhaps between 11 and 2 o'clock, that's where those bathrooms are going to get the most usage. And in those times, potentially we need to clean them every 20 to 30 minutes. Waiting an hour actually will leave it too long. The bins will be overflowing, things will get messy, and it will really diminish the on-site experience. By using IoT sensors, we're basically able to match supply and demand and make sure that things are getting cleaned when they need to be cleaned. So really, really great piece of kit where the need arises. The third instance of where you'd look to apply something like this is where there is a very flexible seasonal demand profile. This is less likely to be applicable in an office because although many offices do obviously have a reduction in headcount on Mondays and Fridays, the reality of what that might translate through to with a day-to-day cleaning team is you would either ask your cleaning team to use their spare time for doing periodic tasks, or alternatively, you might just say, right, Mondays and Fridays are quiet, we're just going to permanently reduce the time. Usually in an office, that would be a more effective solution than moving towards IoT, which is only here going to tell you what you already know. Whereas if you're running, say, a co-working space or a flex space environment where there is that increased flexibility over periods of weeks and months or seasonality, in those situations, what IoT sensors enable us to do is to ring fence the minimum level of cleaning that's required, which would typically be things like bathrooms and kitchens that have to be done every single day in all circumstances. And then for each 20, 30, 40, 50 people that come to site, it triggers X number of hours of additional cleaning, and you implement a completely flexible supply solution. As I say, this is mostly for co-working spaces, truth be told. What it does enable those sorts of organizations to do is to have a type of control over expenditure which previously would have been impossible for them. So this sort of leads us to towards the end already of the webinar. I hope I haven't spoken too quickly and they've given you some great insights into where the cleaning industry is at the moment and where we're heading. The key takeaways really that I want to advocate for are obviously the aqueous ozone system, implementing this and getting your tracking data, showing the real tangible impact they have. IoT sensors as being a great solution to toilet-based problems. And also to give you just this idea of where the future lies. And on that one, if you'll indulge me for a second, I couldn't resist asking AI to come up with a vision of what cleaning would look like in the future. For some strange reason, I don't know why these two robots seem to be arguing with one another. I was hoping that once we had robots, we wouldn't have to face issues like that anymore. Equally, I'm intrigued by why a robot needs to wear dungarees and is concerned with its modesty. But putting that aside, the future is very bright for the industry. I do believe that within 10 to 15 years, approximately, we'll have robots cleaning in offices. What I would just say, though, is that the barrier to entry is far higher for robots than it is for when compared to human beings. And the reason for this is, I don't know if any of you have used robotic taxis or self-driving technology. It's already far safer than any driver or human being, but it's held to a higher standard. Any accident that involves a robotic vehicle will always be front page news. And as a consequence of that, the standard has to be almost completely faultless. And I think the same standard is very likely to apply to robots, which will perhaps slow down their implementation when they're ready. But I think we're probably only 5 to 10 years away from that. So thank you so much for listening. I really do hope that you found it informative. And Hannah, I don't know whether this was part of things, whether you wanted to have a Q&A session, but I'm happy to stay online and chat things through with any of you that have any questions at all. But thank you so much for listening.
I'm hoping you can hear me. My equipment's oh, there we go. It failed and frozen, but yeah, thank you so much. That was really interesting. And when you brought that picture up, the first thing I was wondering was, why is it in dungarees? One is, and then it almost looks like the other one is naked,
Yeah.
because one is dressed, one isn't. But there we are. Robots and technology and AI. But no, that was really interesting. Are there any questions? You can use the chat and I will read them out for you so that you guys stay anonymous on our recording. So let us know in the chat if there are any questions for Tobias. If not, we will say thank you so much and goodbye. Doesn't look like we've got anything through just yet. Oh, here we go. I'll be reaching out on the eco solution, someone said in the chat there. Amazing. Fab, well, thank you so much for being our host for this month's webinar, Tobias. Yeah, hopefully that was useful. As Tobias said, some interesting insights into what's around, what's working, and what's coming next. So appreciate it.
No problem. Thanks a lot, Hannah, and thanks for everyone for listening.
Thanks all. See you soon.